The station hung in the blackness of space like a broken toy. Rust streaked its metal walls and warning lights blinked unevenly, half dead from years of neglect. This was Eris 9, at the very edge of the Andarian sector, far from any major shipping lanes or patrol routes. Most humans had long stopped checking on it. The station's AI system stuttered in its tasks, sending garbled reports to a galaxy that didn't care. Supplies were low. Morale was lower. The crew that remained moved like shadows, tired, silent, and afraid. Ronan Vale tightened the straps on his utility belt and leaned against a bulkhead, listening to the hiss of recycled air. He had worked here for years, once a celebrated mechanic who could fix almost anything. Engines, shields, mining bots. Nothing resisted him. But fame faded fast when the galaxy decided you were expendable. Now he lived in quiet obscurity, repairing failing systems while the others whispered that the station would never last another week. Ronan didn't care about their whispers. He cared about what he could do. A faint vibration ran through the floor. Ronan's eyes narrowed. He knew it wasn't the station settling. This was something else. The AI's monitors flickered. Unidentified ship approaching, it hissed. The voice sounded weak, like it was holding itself together by sheer will. Ronan's jaw tightened. Nibari raiders. There was no other possibility. The sector had been quiet for months, but quiet meant danger more than safety. He ran to the central corridor, the metallic clang of his boots echoing through empty halls. The crew had gathered near the command center, fear etched on their faces. Commander Lyra, tall and stern, tried to calm them. "We've survived worse. Stay calm, follow orders." Her voice shook just slightly. Ronan noticed it. Fear was infectious and the crew wore it like a second skin. Ronan's mind raced. The station's turrets were offline. Weapons systems were frozen. Shields barely held more than a flicker of energy. If the Nibari attacked now, everyone would die. He didn't pause. He grabbed a plasma welder and the portable shield generator from storage, slinging them across his back. "I'll hold them off," he said, voice firm but low. Nobody argued. They knew he meant it. He ran down maintenance shafts and service tunnels, checking panels, rerouting power wherever he could. Sparks flew in the dark corners of the station as he forced life back into the old systems. Every second counted. One misstep could collapse the corridors under pressure or overload a reactor line. The weight of it pressed on him, but Ronan thrived in moments like these. Humans were clever when pushed to the edge. That was what he believed. In the docking bay, the first shadow of the Nibari ship appeared against the backdrop of distant stars. It hung silent, sinister, like a predator waiting to strike. Ronan gritted his teeth. The station trembled as the alien craft drew closer, and the hissing alarms seemed almost embarrassed by their own feeble attempts to warn anyone. The crew peeked from behind doors and bulkheads, eyes wide. Ronan could see the mix of fear and hope. They needed someone to act. They needed a human who refused to let fear win. He knelt at a control panel, hands flying over circuits and wires, improvising solutions no AI could conceive. He rerouted the shield generator to cover the bay, calculating angles and timing from instinct rather than protocol. The machine groaned under strain, sparks spitting from overloaded junctions, but Ronan adjusted, flexed, recalculated. His heart pounded, but his mind was sharper than ever. Fear existed, yes, but it was fuel, not a prison. A sudden shudder ran through the station. Something struck the outer hull. A low, metallic screech echoed through the corridors, and Ronan felt it through his boots, through his chest. One of the Raider scouts had landed. The station's defense turrets were still silent, frozen in useless slumber. Ronan had only seconds before the scout breached the bay, before panic turned into death. He glanced toward the crew who held their breath in the shadows, unable to move, unable to help. All eyes were on him. Responsibility weighed heavily, but he welcomed it. Humans were made for moments like this. He activated the shield generator, and a dome of light shimmered across the docking bay. The scout's claws scraped against it, sparks scattering, but the dome held. Ronan ducked as a burst of plasma scorched the floor beside him, and he could feel the heat even through his gloves. He was exhausted already, muscles straining, lungs burning, but he didn't stop. One wrong calculation, one misjudged angle, and the station would be lost. The scout roared, a sound more mechanical than alive, but Ronan had a plan. He grabbed a welding rod, pointing it toward the alien's hull. A calculated burst of energy would short-circuit the scout long enough to buy precious minutes. He hesitated for barely a heartbeat, then pushed forward. Sparks flew. The hull shivered. The scout screeched and recoiled. For the first time, a chance opened. The Nibari weren't invincible. Not when a human refused to back down. From deep in the station, another rumble vibrated through the floors. Ronan's eyes widened. It wasn't just the scout. More ships were coming. Shadows moved against the starry void outside, silent and deadly. He knew this was only the beginning. The station could survive, but only if he acted faster, smarter and braver than ever before. Every choice now mattered. Every second could be the difference between life and annihilation. Ronan tightened his grip on the plasma welder, took a deep breath, and stepped fully into the docking bay. The shadows of the approaching Nibari ships stretched long across the hull, and the faint hum of the station's trembling AI whispered a warning. They were coming for everything. And for the first time in months, Ronan felt alive. The shadows outside the docking bay grew larger as the Nibari ships circled Eris 9 like predators sizing up their prey. The first burst of plasma hit the hull with a deafening clang, sending vibrations through the floor. Sparks rained down and panels shivered under the impact. The station creaked and groaned, its old metal protesting the sudden assault. Ronan Vale braced himself, gripping the plasma welder like a lifeline, every nerve on fire. He could feel the heat of the attack through his gloves, through the soles of his boots, through his teeth as he clenched them. The crew huddled behind bulkheads, some shaking, some whispering prayers they didn't fully believe. Commander Lyra barked orders, but the words barely carried over the roar of the plasma fire. Hold your positions. Don't panic. Stay alive. Fear made the sentences tremble. Ronan didn't need to hear the words. He felt it, the tension, the danger, the sheer impossibility of survival. And yet, impossibility had never stopped him before. The first raider landed, clattering onto the docking bay floor. Its multi-jointed limbs scraped the metal, leaving deep gouges as sparks shot from friction. Ronan's eyes narrowed. He had seconds. The turrets were still offline. Shields barely hummed with unstable energy. If the raider reached the crew, it would be over in an instant. He sprinted to the nearest control console, ignoring the sparks that hissed around him. The plasma welder in one hand, he yanked open a panel and began rerouting power. Wires sparked and hissed as he connected circuits that hadn't been linked in decades. His mind raced, calculating voltages, estimating energy spikes, improvising where the station's AI had failed. Every choice carried life or death consequences, but Ronan's hands moved with a rhythm born of experience and determination. The raider screeched, a sound that was neither fully organic nor mechanical, and lunged toward the console. Ronan ducked, barely avoiding a swipe that could have shattered his arm. He slammed the welder rod onto the raider's limb, sending a jolt of energy through it. Sparks flew. The alien shrieked, stumbling back, and Ronan seized the moment. He yanked a hidden lever and rerouted power to the shield generator, sending a shimmering dome across the bay. The raider's claws struck the dome, sparks flying, metal screeching, but it held. Ronan didn't pause to celebrate. Another rumble shook the station. He looked out a viewport and saw more Nibari ships dropping from the darkness. Each one was sleek, black, and deadly. There were 5 of them. Maybe more. The crew's fear was palpable, a thick, heavy pressure in the air. One wrong move now and the station would be torn apart. He ran toward the maintenance tunnels, weaving past pipes and conduits, and checked the power grids. Every system was unstable, overloaded from the earlier rerouting. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before something critical failed. But humans thrived on adversity. That was what Ronan believed. Where technology faltered, human ingenuity could step in. From the shadows, a second raider appeared, faster and more aggressive than the first. It leapt toward Ronan with shocking speed. He slammed a welded panel into its path, then spun, striking a nearby junction box. Sparks erupted, arcing across the raider's body. It stumbled, screeching, and Ronan ducked into a service duct. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear. Fear existed, yes, but it sharpened him instead of paralyzing him. He emerged near the central reactor. The station's old fusion core hummed weakly, an energy reserve too dangerous for normal use. But Ronan had an idea, a desperate, brilliant, possibly suicidal idea. If he could channel the reactor's power into the defensive turrets, he could create a plasma barrier strong enough to push back the raiders. He knew the risk. One miscalculation could vaporize the bay and kill the crew. No choice. Humans didn't get the luxury of choice when survival was at stake. Ronan's hands flew over panels, his calculations precise yet instinctive. He linked conduits, rewrote circuits, and rerouted power. Sparks flew from overloaded junctions, metal groaned, and alarms screamed like living things. The Nibari raiders pounded on the hull, sensing the shift in energy. They knew something had changed. Suddenly, a massive impact shook the station, sending Ronan sprawling. A smaller asteroid, likely torn loose by the raiders' attack, slammed against the outer hull. Panels bent. Systems flickered. The crew cried out in panic, and Commander Lyra grabbed onto a railing to steady herself. Ronan gritted his teeth, rising to his feet. This is it. Now or never. He triggered the surge. The turrets came to life, plasma beams lancing through the bay, cutting through the shadowy forms of the raiders. One ship hissed, its shields flaring as energy overloaded its systems. Sparks and smoke filled the bay, and the raiders let out shrill, panicked cries. Ronan ducked as a stray bolt scorched the floor inches from his boots. His chest burned, adrenaline surging, but he didn't stop. The first wave of attackers retreated, but the main fleet loomed outside. More ships were coming. The station trembled under repeated impacts. Ronan's pulse raced, but he already had a plan forming in his mind. Humans didn't just survive. They adapted, they overcame, they turned impossible odds into opportunity. He would do it again. And this time the stakes were higher than ever. The crew peered from cover, fear mixed with awe. They saw one human standing in the docking bay, battered but unbroken, holding the line against a force that should have crushed them all. Ronan Vale's hands were scorched, his face streaked with sweat and grime, but his eyes burned with determination. He had no weapons left except his courage, his mind, and his will. And that was enough, for now. A distant rumble echoed through the station. Something bigger, darker was approaching. Ronan's jaw tightened. The Nabari weren't done. Not by far. The battle for Eris 9 was only beginning. Ronan Vale pressed himself against the cold metal of the maintenance duct, sweat stinging his eyes. The docking bay outside was chaos, plasma beams arcing across the hull, sparks raining from every impact, and the Nabari raiders screeching as they retreated and regrouped. Every second stretched thin like a wire about to snap. He had bought the crew a brief moment of safety, but the fleet outside meant the fight wasn't over. Not by far. He peered through a small viewport into the bay. The shield generator flickered, struggling to contain the energy surges, and the turrets spat bursts of plasma, tearing through the first wave of raiders. But more ships were coming. Ronan's mind raced. The station systems were old, corroded, barely functional, and yet he needed them to perform miracles. Humans thrived where machines faltered. That was the truth he clung to. He crawled through the ducts, wrench in hand, scanning the schematics in his head. The station's old fusion core was unstable, humming weakly like a tired beast, but it contained enough energy to do what no AI could. If he could link it directly to the turrets, the plasma output would be strong enough to create a barrier capable of repelling the entire Nabari strike force. But one misstep, and the core could explode, taking Eris 9 and everyone on it with it. Ronan exhaled slowly, centering himself. He didn't have the luxury of hesitation. Humans didn't wait for perfection. They acted, adapted, survived. Every calculation he made, every wire he crossed, was born from decades of instinct and experience. The fear was real, gnawing at his gut, but it sharpened him instead of paralyzing him. He dropped into the central reactor chamber, heat and radiation prickling his skin, the dull hum of the fusion core vibrating through the floor. The energy readouts flickered erratically. He needed a direct link from the core to the defensive turrets, a path no system had ever been designed to handle. Sparks hissed as he connected makeshift conduits, and panels warped under the strain. A slip of a hand could short-circuit everything. A miscalculation could end life on Eris 9 in an instant. A sound behind him made him flinch. One of the Nabari raiders had slipped through the shadows, faster than he anticipated. Its multi-jointed limbs scraped against the floor, claws clicking like knives. Ronan spun, swinging his wrench in a wide arc. The alien screeched, stumbling back, but only for a moment. It lunged again. Ronan slammed a nearby control panel onto its path, sparks flying, metal screeching. The raider shrieked and recoiled, leaving him just enough time to finish connecting the conduits. He wiped sweat from his brow and looked at the flickering readouts. The surge would be dangerous. He could feel the energy pulsing like a heartbeat, unpredictable and wild. But humans weren't made to back down from impossible odds. Ronan took a deep breath and flipped the switch. Energy surged through the station like a living creature, arcing along every wire he had connected. The turrets roared to life, glowing plasma cutting through the bay. The shield generator expanded, stretching its light like a web over the docking bay, stronger, faster, more intense than anything it had done before. Sparks rained from overloaded conduits. The station groaned under the sudden strain, metal panels bending and screaming in protest. Ronan's hands ached, muscles burning, but he kept adjusting the conduits, fine-tuning the surge, making the energy flow like water through pipes. Outside, the Nabari raiders screamed, claws scraping against the shield, plasma blasts deflecting harmlessly. One ship's hull flared violently as the overcharged turrets hit it with precision. The alien craft spun in the void, its energy shields collapsing under the human-engineered onslaught. Ronan ducked as a stray beam scorched the floor beside him, sparks slicing through the air. The crew watched from cover, eyes wide. They had never seen anything like this. One human standing against impossible odds, shaping death and destruction with nothing but ingenuity, courage, and sheer will. Commander Lyra's voice trembled as she whispered, How is he doing this? Ronan ignored her. He couldn't. The energy flow was unstable. Another misstep and the core would explode. His fingers danced over panels, rerouting power, adjusting the flow, calculating in real time. Every second mattered. One slip could mean death, but hesitation was worse. Suddenly, a massive shadow fell across the viewport. A larger Nabari warship, far deadlier than the first, had arrived. Its hull gleamed black, shield flares pulsing like a heartbeat. Ronan's stomach clenched. This was no longer just a raid, it was an assault meant to annihilate the station. He clenched his jaw and looked at the crew's faces, frightened but trusting. Their survival depended entirely on him. Humans had survived because they acted when others froze. He took a deep breath and began improvising again, rerouting auxiliary generators to the turrets, overloading power conduits with split-second precision. Sparks flew in showers, alarms screamed, the floor vibrated beneath him. But slowly the turrets began to hit harder, faster, more accurately. The Nabari warship fired, a concentrated plasma bolt, aiming directly at the docking bay. Ronan anticipated it, redirecting the surge through a secondary conduit. The bolt struck the reinforced shield, exploding harmlessly into sparks and light. The warship faltered, its shields flickering under the human-engineered assault. A grin flashed across Ronan's face, though his hands shook and his lungs burned. Humans weren't meant to be perfect. They were meant to endure, to adapt, and to fight when survival demanded it. The impossible was no longer just a concept. It was happening here, in this battered, forgotten station, because one human refused to yield. From the shadows he saw the crew emerging, cautiously, hope threading through their fear. One by one they joined in, repairing systems, rerouting power, and helping guide energy surges. Ronan's ingenuity had inspired them. Humans, working together, could turn the tide even against a superior enemy. And yet, a low rumble ran through the station, more threatening than before. Something bigger was coming. The warship had called for reinforcements. Ronan's grin faded. He wiped sweat from his brow and tightened his grip on the wrench. He knew the next wave would be worse. Far worse. But he also knew this: humans didn't surrender. Not when hope was slim, not when the odds were impossible, not when survival demanded courage. And Ronan Vale was about to prove that to the Nabari, and to the galaxy, one brilliant, dangerous, impossible move at a time. Ronan Vale's arms ached, muscles screaming with exhaustion, but he couldn't stop. The docking bay shuddered with every impact from the approaching Nabari warships. Outside the viewport, shadows stretched across the void, black hulls gleaming like predators circling a cornered prey. The station trembled under repeated plasma blasts, panels groaning and sparks flying like deadly rain. Every second was a choice between survival and annihilation. The crew had emerged from hiding, moving cautiously to assist with repairs. Their fear was still heavy in the air, but there was also awe. One human had taken the impossible odds and bent them into survival. Commander Lyra's voice rang sharp through the chaos. Ronan, the secondary power conduits won't hold much longer. He didn't respond. Words could wait, action could not. He sprinted along the corridor, wrench in one hand, welder in the other, rerouting failing power lines to the turrets. Sparks hissed from overloaded panels. The station's old metal groaned under the strain, threatening to collapse. Every step was a gamble, every motion a risk of death. Yet Ronan pressed on. Humans didn't wait for perfect conditions. They adapted. They endured. They triumphed where machines faltered. A sudden alarm screamed through the station. The main hull had taken a direct hit. The vibrations knocked him to the floor, and for a heartbeat, everything seemed lost. The crew cried out from cover. One of the Nabari ships had broken through the plasma barrier and landed a strike on the docking bay's outer edge. Ronan gritted his teeth, brushing metal shards from his sleeves, and rose again. Fear was real, but it didn't stop him. Humans thrived in moments like these. He glanced at the fusion core, pulsing with unstable energy. The conduit linking it to the turrets was stretched to its limits. One more misstep and it could blow the station apart. But retreat wasn't an option. He remembered the words of an old mentor: a human who refuses to quit can outthink anything, even the stars themselves. He held on to that, letting it guide his hands. Ronan ducked under a falling panel, then climbed into the overhead service ducts. From there, he had a direct line to the control systems. He began rerouting auxiliary generators from the station's lower levels, diverting energy to reinforce the turrets and stabilize the plasma barrier. Sparks rained from overloaded conduits, smoke twisted through the air, and the hum of the fusion core reached a nearly deafening pitch. He ignored it, focusing on the task at hand. Humans weren't meant to stop at danger, they moved through it. A massive Nibari warship loomed close, larger and faster than anything they had encountered. Its cannons fired a concentrated plasma beam, aimed directly at the reinforced docking bay. Ronan anticipated the trajectory in an instant. He redirected the energy surge through a secondary conduit, guiding the beam into the turret's plasma stream. The resulting explosion of light and heat lit the docking bay like a nova. Sparks flew across the floor, panels buckled, and alarms screamed louder than ever. The warship faltered, its shields failing under the human-engineered attack. The crew gasped, stepping closer to watch. Their fear had turned into hope, threading through adrenaline. One by one they moved to help, patching minor systems, guiding energy flows, and repairing conduits. Ronan's ingenuity had given them not just survival but purpose. Humans, working together, could turn the tide even against impossible enemies. A smaller raider leapt into the bay, claws extended, but Ronan was ready. He swung the welder like a hammer, connecting a precise arc of plasma directly onto its limb. Sparks and smoke engulfed it. The raider shrieked and stumbled back, disabled. Another followed, only to be intercepted by the turrets, now firing faster and more accurately than ever. Every motion, every decision was calculated but instinctive, a human mind thinking faster than the machines. The large warship hesitated, recoiling as the concentrated turret fire tore through its hull. Ronan realized the moment had come to finish the fight. He sprinted toward the central control console, ignoring the heat and smoke that clawed at him. Every wire, every circuit, every conduit he had patched now fed the turrets with a precision burst of plasma energy. He triggered the final surge. The turrets blazed brighter than ever before, a wall of plasma slicing across the void. The Nibari fleet faltered. One by one ships retreated, their shields flaring and hulls damaged. The station shook violently, but it held. Sparks rained from the energy conduits, panels bent, and alarms screamed, but Eris 9 had survived. The impossible had been done. Ronan fell to his knees, chest heaving, sweat and grime streaking his face. Around him, the crew emerged fully, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and admiration. Commander Lyra approached, eyes wide. You saved us. All of us." Her voice trembled. Ronan shook his head, exhaustion threatening to collapse him completely. "We saved ourselves. Humans survive, because we refuse to give up." The crew smiled, relief flooding their faces. For the first time in months, the station didn't feel abandoned. Eris 9 hummed with life again, powered by ingenuity, courage, and sheer determination. Word would spread through the sector. This human, this one mechanic, had turned the tide against a superior alien force. Humans were dangerous when they refused to surrender. But even as the crew celebrated, Ronan's eyes scanned the void. The Nibari might retreat, but they would return. And next time the threat would be greater. He tightened his grip on the wrench, already thinking, already calculating. Humans didn't survive by resting. They survived by preparing, by thinking faster, by acting braver than anyone else dared. Ronan Vale looked at the crew at the battered but standing station and whispered to himself, "We're not done yet. Not by a long shot." In the darkness of space, one human had changed everything. One human had shown that courage, intelligence, and determination could defy impossible odds. The station survived. The crew survived. Humanity, small but brilliant, had won this battle. And for Ronan that was enough, for now. The air inside Eris 9 smelled of scorched metal and ozone, but it no longer carried the thick weight of fear. The station creaked and groaned, battered but alive. Outside, the void of space was empty again. The Nibari had retreated, this time for good. The silence was almost deafening after the chaos, and the crew moved cautiously through the corridors, eyes wide, still unsure if they were dreaming or awake. Ronan Vale slumped against a bulkhead, his body trembling from exhaustion. Sweat mixed with grime, streaking his face, and every muscle in his body burned from the relentless hours of survival. He looked at the docking bay through a cracked viewport. Sparks flickered from torn panels, the plasma turrets still hummed, and the shield generator shivered weakly, but the station had survived. Against impossible odds, Eris 9 had survived. Commander Lyra approached him, her face streaked with sweat and dirt. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, reflected a mix of awe and gratitude. "Ronan, you did it. You saved the station. You saved us all." Her voice was unsteady, betraying relief she had held back for hours. Ronan shook his head. "We saved ourselves," he said quietly. "The station, the crew, all of us. Humans survive because we refuse to give up. Because we keep moving when nothing else will." He coughed, his chest tight, then leaned back against the bulkhead, letting the weight of everything finally settle. The crew gathered in the docking bay, still shaken but slowly breathing easier. One by one they began checking systems, patching wires, restoring life to the station. For weeks, Eris 9 had been abandoned in more ways than one. Supplies were short, systems failing, morale at rock bottom, but now for the first time hope had returned. Humans could fight back. Humans could endure. Humans could triumph. And they had seen it happen. A young engineer, barely more than a boy, approached Ronan cautiously. His hands shook as he held out a panel he had repaired. "Sir, I didn't think we'd make it. You showed us." Ronan took the panel, nodding and smiled faintly. "That's what humans do. We face impossible odds. And we survive." The boy's eyes widened, absorbing the truth of those words. Courage wasn't just about strength or weapons, it was about refusing to give up, even when all seemed lost. Ronan moved through the station, checking the turrets and energy conduits. Each system was still strained, still groaning under the effort, but it was alive. The crew followed, learning from him, watching every move. He explained how he had rerouted power, how he had stabilized the fusion core, how improvisation and split-second decisions had turned death into survival. They listened intently, understanding that the lessons went beyond mechanics. They were lessons about life, about ingenuity, about what it meant to be human. Outside, in the emptiness of space, the Nibari fleet had vanished. Their retreat was certain. They would not expect the humans of Eris 9 to rise again so quickly, to be ready, to fight smarter next time. Ronan's actions had not only saved the station, they had sent a message. Humanity was dangerous. Humanity was clever. Humanity refused to be conquered. Later, in the control room, Ronan sat with Commander Lyra and the senior crew. They discussed upgrades, reinforcements, and training. Supplies would be requested from neighboring sectors, weapons systems repaired, turrets recalibrated. The station would no longer be forgotten. It would become a symbol of human resilience, a beacon for any who doubted what a single human could achieve when backed by determination and courage. Ronan's gaze drifted to a viewport overlooking the black void. Stars shimmered coldly, distant and indifferent. Yet for the first time in months he felt a small warmth. Against the emptiness, against the Nibari, against all odds, humans had survived. And not just survived, they had triumphed. He thought of the crew, young and old, and knew that their lives had been forever changed. Courage was contagious, determination was infectious, and one human could make a difference the galaxy would never forget. The station hummed, and Ronan finally allowed himself to rest. His body ached, but his mind was alive with possibilities. He would improve the station, train the crew, prepare for whatever came next. Humans didn't wait for rescue. Humans didn't surrender. Humans endured, and when necessary they fought brilliantly, courageously, impossibly. Word spread quickly through the Endarian sector. Merchants, miners, and nearby colonies heard the tale of the lone human mechanic who had defended a forgotten station, who had faced the Nibari fleet and turned certain death into survival. Some came with supplies, some with reinforcements, some simply to witness the legend growing in real time. Ronan, however, didn't care about fame. He cared about one thing: ensuring that humans in that sector and beyond would be ready when the next threat arrived. Weeks passed. Eris 9 thrummed with life again. Systems stabilized, repairs completed, and training began. Ronan walked the corridors, checking, teaching, mentoring. The crew no longer whispered about fear. They discussed strategy, repairs, and tactics. They were no longer shadows in a dying station. They were a family, a unit, ready to survive anything the galaxy threw at them. And as he worked, Ronan thought of the void outside, of the Nibari lurking somewhere far away, and smiled faintly. Humans had shown what they could do. One human had changed the odds. One human had turned fear into action. One human had ensured that humanity would not be forgotten, even in the cold, dark corners of space. The station was alive. The crew was alive. Humanity, small and defiant, had triumphed. And in the quiet of the control room, Ronan Vale whispered to himself as if making a promise to the stars, "We will survive. We will endure. And we will never, ever be forgotten." The void outside remained silent, indifferent, and vast. But humanity had left its mark. And one human had shown that even in the darkest corner of space, courage, determination, and brilliance could shine brighter than any star.